He bought a retired police K9 for just $5. But the dog didn't act like it was done. It didn't follow commands, didn't seek comfort, just kept looking toward the same frozen forest. Every night, it woke at the same hour, like it was still waiting for something to come back. When he finally followed it into the snow, he realized the dog wasn't leading him forward. It was going back, to something no one had ever finished. What they found out there wasn't a mystery, it was a moment that had been missed. So before we begin, tell me where you're watching from, share your thoughts after the story, and help us reach 1,000 subscribers by liking and subscribing for more stories like this. Snow didn't fall in the mountains the way people imagined. It didn't drift gently or settle like something peaceful. It came in thin, relentless sheets, wind-driven, angled, scraping against wood and glass like it had somewhere to be. By mid-morning, the world outside Ethan Crosswell's cabin had already lost its edges. Trees became shadows. The sky flattened into a dull, colorless weight pressing down on everything below. Inside, nothing moved unless Ethan made it. He stood by the narrow window, one hand resting against the cold frame, watching the white blur swallow the tree line. His reflection hovered faintly in the glass, broad shoulders, a face cut sharper by years than by age, eyes that never quite settled on anything for long, 46 years old, and still carrying himself like someone waiting for orders that would never come. The cabin was functional, not comfortable, not styled, just enough to exist in. A table, a stove, a narrow bed against the wall, everything placed with intention, everything easy to reach. Even now, the folding knife sat beside the bed exactly where his hand would fall if he woke suddenly. He didn't remember the last time he had woken without reaching for it. Ethan pulled his gaze from the window and checked his watch, a mechanical one, scratched across the glass, ticking steady against his wrist, the kind that didn't depend on signal or charge, the kind that kept going even when everything else stopped. Fuel was low. That was the only reason he left. The drive down from the ridge took longer than usual. Ice clung to the road in uneven patches, and Ethan kept his speed controlled, hands steady on the wheel. The truck didn't complain. It never did. Like everything else he owned, it existed to function, not to feel. The town below wasn't much. A gas station. A diner that only opened when it felt like it. A sheriff's office that looked like it had been built before anyone had decided the place was worth naming. Ethan didn't plan to stop anywhere except the pump. But as he pulled in, he noticed the lot across the road, half empty, scattered with folding tables and metal racks. A sign leaned crooked against a post, County Asset Disposal, Final Clearance. He stared at it longer than necessary. He didn't need anything. That had been the point. Still, after the tank clicked full, he found himself crossing the road. The air smelled faintly of oil and damp cardboard. Most of the items laid out were forgettable. Old radios, dented toolboxes, cracked office chairs, the kind of things no one wanted, but no one had bothered to throw away properly either. A man stood near a folding table, flipping through a clipboard, thick neck, tired posture, uniform slightly too loose like it had stopped fitting years ago, but no one cared enough to replace it. "Looking for something?" he asked without looking up. "Just passing through," Ethan said. The man nodded once. "Everything's priced to go, or not, either way." His voice carried no real interest in the outcome. Ethan moved slowly along the tables, not really seeing anything. He wasn't here for things. He didn't know why he'd stopped. Then he noticed the space at the far end. Not because it stood out, because it didn't. A single chain anchored loosely to a metal post, a water bowl, half frozen, and beside it, sitting on the cracked asphalt as if the cold didn't exist, was the dog. German Shepherd, older, lean in a way that spoke more of use than neglect. The black and tan coat dulled by time, the fur along its neck thicker, uneven like it had grown back wrong once. One ear notched at the edge, not enough to ruin the symmetry, just enough to break it. It wasn't looking at him. It was looking past everything. Ethan slowed. The man behind the table followed his gaze and sighed, like this part always took longer than he wanted. "Yeah," he said. "That one." Ethan stepped closer. The dog didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't turn its head. It just stayed there, body still, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the lot, beyond the town, beyond anything visible. "What's his story?" Ethan asked. The man finally looked up. His eyes were dull, but not unkind. Just finished. "Name's not listed," he said. "Came through a search and rescue unit, K9. Case got shut down. Dog got reassigned, then reassigned again. You know how that goes." Ethan didn't respond. The man continued, flipping a page he wasn't really reading. Nobody claimed him. No handler transfer. Paperwork stalled. Then it didn't. What happened to the case? The man scratched the back of his neck, eyes drifting away. "Missing hiker, winter storm. They searched for a week, maybe more. Never found anything. Eventually it gets marked cold, then closed." "And the dog?" The man gave a short, humorless breath. "Dog kept going back to the same area, wouldn't disengage, wouldn't settle. After a while, that's a liability, not an asset." He tapped the clipboard once, like that explained everything. "Been bounced around since. Nobody wants a dog that won't stand down." Ethan's gaze shifted back to the shepherd, still not looking at him, still not reacting. It wasn't the lack of fear that caught his attention. It was the absence of anything else. No confusion, no hope, no searching, just focus, like it was still waiting. Ethan crouched slowly, keeping his movement deliberate, not cautious, controlled. The dog's ear flicked once, not toward him, just acknowledging something had changed. Ethan held his position, let the silence stretch. Up close, the details were clearer. Faint scarring along the front legs, not recent, healed clean but not well, the kind of marks that came from work, not accidents. "You still on it?" Ethan said quietly, almost to himself. The dog didn't respond, but something in its posture shifted. Not movement, not quite tension, just attention, narrowing. The man behind him spoke again. $5. Ethan didn't look back. "That's it?" he asked. "End of the line," the man said. "No paperwork worth talking about. No guarantees. You take him, he's yours. You don't, he goes wherever the next truck's headed." Ethan let that sit. $5. Not because the dog was worth that, because no one had decided it was worth more. The wind picked up, cutting across the lot. The water in the bowl rattled faintly against the metal edge. The dog didn't move, didn't even blink. Ethan reached out slowly, stopping short of contact, close enough to feel the cold coming off the animal's coat. The shepherd's eyes shifted, just slightly. For the first time, it looked at him. Not like a stray, not like something asking, like something measuring. Ethan felt it then, not recognition, not connection, something else, familiar, the kind of look he'd seen before on men who hadn't left the mission, even after the mission had left them. Ethan stood. "I'll take him." The man, Deputy Alan Pierce, according to the faded patch on his uniform, didn't ask questions. He just pulled a form halfway out of a folder, then shoved it back like he remembered it didn't matter. "Cash?" Ethan handed him a $5. Pierce took it quickly, like the transaction needed to be finished before it could change its mind. "Leash is there," he said, nodding toward the chain. "That's all he comes with." Ethan stepped back toward the dog. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Ethan unclipped the chain. The metal clicked softly. The shepherd didn't bolt, didn't lean forward, didn't react at all. It just stood. Slowly, deliberately, like a machine coming back online after too long in standby. Ethan turned toward the truck. "Come on," he said. He didn't expect anything. Behind him, there was silence. Then, a single step, measured, not obedient, not hesitant, just chosen. Ethan didn't look back. But for the first time in a long while, he was aware of something following him that wasn't memory. The dog didn't explore the cabin. It didn't sniff corners, didn't circle for a place to lie down, didn't test boundaries the way most animals did when introduced to a new space. It walked in behind Ethan, paused just past the doorway, and then stopped, as if it had reached the limit of something invisible. Ethan closed the door behind them. The latch clicked, a small, ordinary sound. The shepherd's head turned slightly toward it, not curiosity, not concern, acknowledgement. Ethan hung his jacket on the hook by the wall, boots still damp with snow. He didn't look back right away. He gave the dog space, not because he expected fear, but because whatever this animal was, it wasn't going to respond to pressure. "You can move," he said, not raising his voice. The dog didn't. Ethan exhaled quietly through his nose. Not frustration, just adjustment. He walked to the counter, filled a metal bowl with water, set it down a few feet from where the dog stood. Then another bowl, this one with food. Dry, basic, enough. He stepped away. Minutes passed. The cabin settled into its usual silence, broken only by the faint crackle of the stove and the wind pushing against the walls. Ethan sat at the table, watching without staring. The dog didn't rush. It didn't hesitate either. It moved when it decided to, 2 steps forward, then stopped again, ears tilting slightly, not toward Ethan but toward something outside. Listening. Then it lowered its head and drank. No urgency, no hunger, just function. Ethan leaned back in his chair. He had seen dogs before. Trained ones, disciplined ones, broken ones. This wasn't any of those. Night came early in the mountains. By the time the last light slipped behind the ridge, the cabin had already narrowed into shadow and firelight. Ethan checked the windows, the door, the stove. Routine. Not because he expected anything, but because the absence of routine felt worse. The dog hadn't left the same general area near the door. It had eaten some, not all. Drunk enough, and now it stood again, angled slightly toward the same stretch of forest beyond the cabin, as if the walls didn't exist. Ethan watched it for a long moment. "Nothing out there?" he said. The words felt unnecessary the moment they left his mouth. The dog didn't respond, didn't even flick an ear. Ethan rubbed a hand over the back of his neck, then moved to the bed. He sat down, unlaced his boots slowly, placed them side by side beneath the frame. The knife stayed where it always did. He lay back, one arm resting across his chest, eyes open. The dog remained standing. Minutes turned into an hour. The fire dimmed slightly. Wind pressed harder against the walls. At some point, Ethan's eyes closed. He woke without moving, not to a sound, but to a shift, the kind of shift that didn't belong to the room, but to something inside it. His hand found the knife before his mind fully caught up. Still. Listen, the cabin held its breath. Then, a low, controlled exhale. Not human. Ethan turned his head. The dog stood in the same place, but its posture had changed. Rigid, not aggressive, focused, its ears angled forward, its body aligned toward the door, every muscle held in a state of readiness that didn't come from fear. It wasn't reacting. It was anticipating. Ethan stayed still, watching. "What is it?" he asked quietly. The dog didn't look at him. It took one step closer to the door, then stopped. Ethan listened harder now. Wind, wood, nothing else. After a long moment, the dog's posture eased, just enough to release the tension without abandoning the position. It lay down, but not fully. Front legs forward, head up, eyes open, guarding. Ethan let the knife rest back against the bed frame. He didn't sleep again that night. Morning didn't change anything. The dog was awake before him. Or maybe it hadn't slept at all. Ethan stepped outside just after first light, the cold cutting sharper than the day before. Snow had settled deeper overnight, smoothing the ground into something almost untouched. The dog followed, not at his side, a few steps behind, always the same distance. Ethan walked toward the tree line, boots pressing into fresh powder. He didn't call the dog. He didn't need to. He stopped near the edge where the forest thickened. The dog moved past him then, just a step, and froze. Its body angled, not toward a sound, not toward movement, but toward a direction, a fixed line. Ethan followed the angle with his eyes. There was nothing there, just trees. Just snow. "Go on," he said, gesturing slightly. The dog didn't move, didn't advance, didn't retreat. It stood there like a compass needle locked into place. Ethan studied it. Not curiosity this time, recognition. He didn't push, didn't try to redirect. He turned back toward the cabin, letting the moment pass without forcing meaning into it. The dog hesitated, then followed. Later that day, Ethan drove into town again. Not for supplies. Not exactly. The truck rolled slower this time, tires crunching over packed snow as he pulled up near the general store. A figure stood off to the side, near a rack of firewood stacked unevenly against the wall. Older man, lean frame wrapped in a worn coat that had seen more winters than it should have. A knit cap pulled low, gray beard uneven, not styled, just grown. He looked up as Ethan approached, eyes pale, sharp despite the age. "You're the one took that dog," the man said. Not a question. Ethan stopped a few feet away. That obvious? The man shrugged lightly. Pierce talks, not much else to do. Ethan nodded once. The man shifted his weight, glancing past Ethan briefly, to the truck where the shepherd sat inside, still as stone. Harvey Cole, he said after a moment, extending a hand. Ethan shook it. The grip was firm, dry, steady. Ethan. Harvey nodded. Didn't think anyone would take him. Didn't think anyone else would. That earned a faint, almost smile. They stood in silence for a moment, the wind moving lightly between them. Harvey spoke again, quieter this time. You know what he was used for? Search and rescue, Ethan said. Yeah. Harvey's gaze drifted toward the trees beyond town. Last job he had didn't end right. Ethan didn't respond. He let the man continue. Guy went missing up past the ridge. Storm came in fast. Teams went out, dog included. They worked it hard for days. Harvey paused, as if choosing what mattered. Then command pulled them. Weather got worse. Risk wasn't worth it anymore. Standard call, Ethan said. Harvey nodded slowly. Yeah, standard. He looked back at Ethan then, something heavier settling behind his eyes. But that dog didn't see it that way. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Harvey continued, voice even. They brought him back, tried to stand him down. Move him on. He shook his head once. Didn't take. Kept trying to go back out, every time. Ethan glanced toward the truck. Inside, the shepherd hadn't moved. Eventually, Harvey said, people stopped trying to explain things like that. Easier to just pass it along. Ethan let the words sit, then asked, You were there? Harvey's gaze didn't waver. I was part of the volunteer team, he said. Didn't run point, just followed tracks, filled gaps. What do you think happened? Harvey looked out toward the mountains again. I think, he said slowly, sometimes a trail doesn't end where we stop looking. Silence stretched between them. Wind carried loose snow across the ground in thin lines. Harvey spoke once more, softer now. There are dogs, he said, that don't leave a job behind, even when the people do. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. On the drive back, the road felt narrower, not because it had changed, because something had. Ethan kept his eyes forward, hands steady on the wheel. Beside him, the shepherd sat upright, not pressed against the door, not restless, just present. Watching. Not the road, not Ethan, the forest, always the same direction. Ethan followed that invisible line again. Still nothing, just trees, just snow, just distance. He exhaled slowly. Whatever it is, he said under his breath, you're not done with it. The dog didn't react, but it didn't look away either. Back at the cabin, the routine resumed. Fire, water, silence. But something had shifted, not outside. Inside the space between them. Ethan didn't try to close that space, didn't try to bridge it. He sat at the table, hands resting flat against the wood, eyes occasionally lifting toward the door where the dog had taken its place again. Not lying down fully, not resting, waiting. Ethan studied that posture for a long time, then leaned back slightly, gaze drifting toward the window, toward the forest beyond. For the first time since he'd arrived here months ago, he didn't see it as empty. He saw it as unfinished. The storm didn't announce itself. It built slowly. Pressure in the air, a silence that pressed too close, the kind of quiet that made small sounds feel misplaced. By late afternoon, the sky had lowered into a dense gray sheet, and the forest beyond the cabin had started to dissolve at the edges. Ethan noticed it, but he didn't react. Storms were part of the terrain. You adjusted, you waited, you didn't chase movement into something you couldn't see. Inside, the cabin felt smaller than usual, not physically, just occupied differently. Vargo hadn't taken its place by the door this time. It was pacing, not aimlessly, not nervously, a pattern. 3 steps toward the wall, pause, turn, 4 steps back toward the window, pause again, head slightly angled, not listening for something specific but searching through layers of sound. Ethan sat at the table, watching. He didn't interrupt, didn't speak. There was no point. Whatever was happening wasn't about him. The wind picked up harder, rattling the window frame. Snow began to strike the glass in fast, uneven bursts. Vargo stopped. Its body tightened, not rigid but coiled. Then it moved to the door. Ethan straightened slightly, Not tonight, he said. The words came out even, controlled. The dog didn't react. It stood there, staring at the handle, waiting. Ethan stayed where he was. He let the silence stretch, expecting the moment to pass the way the others had. It didn't. Vargo stepped forward, placed its nose against the door, then pushed. The wood held. Ethan rose slowly, crossing the room in measured steps. "You go out there," he said, voice quieter now. "You don't come back." Not a threat, not a command, a fact. Vargo didn't turn, didn't acknowledge him at all. It stepped back, just enough, then lunged forward. The impact hit the door hard, a dull, solid thud that shook the frame. Ethan's hand moved instinctively, catching the latch just as the dog struck again. "Stop!" The word came sharper this time. Vargo froze. For a second, everything held, the wind, the room, the tension between them. Then the dog shifted its weight, not backing down, not escalating, just waiting for a decision. Ethan stared at it. This wasn't agitation. This wasn't fear. This was intent. He felt something tighten in his chest, something old, something he hadn't named in a long time. The moment before you moved, the moment where staying was no longer an option, even if leaving made no sense. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then he reached for the latch. The storm hit him the second the door opened, cold, sharp, immediate. Snow whipped sideways, cutting visibility down to almost nothing. The world beyond the porch had already collapsed into motion and white. Vargo didn't hesitate. It moved past him in a straight line, fast, low to the ground, cutting into the storm like it had been waiting for this exact moment. Ethan stepped out after it, pulling the door shut behind him without thinking. "Slow down," he called. The wind swallowed the words. The dog didn't slow. Ethan followed, not chasing, tracking. His boots sank deep into fresh snow, each step deliberate, controlled. He didn't try to close the distance too quickly. Losing footing out here meant more than just falling. Vargo moved ahead, then stopped, waited. Ethan caught up. The dog turned slightly, not looking at him, but acknowledging his position. Then it moved again. This wasn't a straight path. It wasn't even a clear one. Vargo didn't head deeper in a single direction. It cut left, then forward, then angled back slightly. Twice, it circled a patch of trees, nose low, then lifted its head as if correcting itself. Ethan noticed. "You're not leading," he muttered. The dog didn't respond. But it didn't change behavior either. It wasn't guiding him. It was searching. The difference settled slowly in Ethan's mind, reshaping how he moved. He stopped trying to predict direction, started watching the pattern instead. Where the dog slowed, where it paused, where it doubled back. The storm thickened, visibility shrinking further. Trees blurred into one another, shadows shifting with the wind. It would have been easy to get turned around. But Ethan didn't track landmarks. He tracked Vargo, and Vargo wasn't lost. At some point, he couldn't tell how long, the terrain shifted, subtle at first. The ground leveled slightly. The trees thinned just enough to change the way the wind moved through them. Vargo slowed, then stopped. Ethan came up beside it, breathing controlled, scanning through the snow. It took him a second to see it. The structure sat low against the landscape, half buried under drifted snow. The roof slanted unevenly, one side sagging slightly. The wood had gone gray with age, edges softened by time and weather. A cabin. Not abandoned, not exactly. Forgotten. Ethan stepped closer, boots crunching against ice crust beneath the fresh snow. The door was still there, partially visible, frame intact, though one hinge looked strained. He circled once, slow, eyes tracing the outline. Old supply shelter, search and rescue maybe, temporary, not meant to last. He stopped near the front. "Is this it?" he said quietly. Vargo didn't answer. It didn't move toward the door, didn't sniff the walls, didn't try to enter. It stood just outside the threshold, body angled slightly to the side, not blocking the entrance but not yielding it either. Guarding. Ethan watched it. "This where you stopped?" he asked. The wind cut between them, carrying snow in thin slicing currents. Vargo shifted its stance, one step forward, then stopped again, its head tilted, not confused, not uncertain. Correcting. Ethan felt it then, not a realization, a question. "Or is this where you left?" he said. The dog's ears flicked, barely, but it didn't move closer. Ethan reached for the door. The wood resisted at first, swollen from moisture and cold. He put more weight into it, shoulder pressing forward. The hinge groaned, then gave. The door opened just enough to create a gap. Cold air rushed out, not warmer, just still. Ethan leaned slightly, peering inside. Dark. Snow had drifted through cracks in the walls, layering unevenly across the floor. The outlines of old shelving lined the back wall, some collapsed, some still standing. A metal hook hung near the entrance, empty. No movement, no sound, no immediate signs of anything recent. He pushed the door open a little further. "You coming?" he said over his shoulder. Vargo didn't. Ethan turned. The dog had taken a step back now, not retreating, holding position. Its gaze wasn't on the cabin, it was on the space around it, scanning, waiting. Ethan studied that for a long moment, then looked back inside. This wasn't what Vargo had been trying to reach. Not exactly. He stepped back from the doorway, closed the door halfway, leaving it resting against the frame. Vargo didn't move. It stayed where it was, standing, watching, not entering, not leaving. Ethan wiped a hand across his face, snow melting instantly against his skin. "You didn't bring me here," he said quietly. The wind shifted again, carrying a sharper gust through the clearing. Vargo turned its head slightly. Then, without warning, it stepped away from the cabin. 2 steps, 3, then it stopped, looked back, not at Ethan, at the ground, at the snow, at something beneath it. Ethan followed its gaze. There was nothing visible, just white, just surface. But the dog didn't move. It stood there like it had before the door, not indicating, not signaling, just returning. Ethan took a slow breath, then stepped forward. The storm hadn't eased. If anything, it had settled in. The world beyond the small clearing was already closing again, edges blurring, shapes dissolving back into white. Ethan glanced once at the cabin, then at the dog. Vargo wasn't finished, not here, not yet, and for the first time since he'd taken it from that lot, Ethan understood something clearly. This wasn't about being led anywhere. This was about going back, again and again, until something lined up. "All right," Ethan said quietly. Not agreement, not commitment, just acknowledgement. He adjusted his footing in the snow, shifting his weight forward. Vargo didn't move immediately. Then, slowly, it turned and started back into the storm, étais. By morning, the storm had moved on. Not gone, just shifted somewhere else, dragging its weight across the range. The sky over Ethan's cabin had opened slightly, letting in a pale, washed-out light that made everything look cleaner than it was. The forest didn't feel the same. It wasn't the snow, that was expected. It was the silence after. Ethan stood outside, boots planted at the edge of the clearing, watching the trees as if something might step out of them if he waited long enough. Behind him, Vargo remained near the porch. Not pacing this time, not restless, but not settled either. It hadn't returned to the cabin door like before. Instead, it stood off to the side, angled toward the direction they had come from the night before, toward the storm, toward the cabin buried in snow miles away. Ethan didn't look back at it. He didn't need to. He could feel the line of its attention, still pointing somewhere, still unfinished. He drove down to town before noon. This time, he didn't pretend it was for supplies. The truck rolled past the general store, past the gas station, and continued toward the smaller road that led to the ranger outpost, a structure set farther out, tucked near the base of a slope where the trees opened just enough to make room for a gravel lot and a low building reinforced for winter. Ethan cut the engine and sat there for a moment. The place wasn't busy. It never was. A single truck parked near the entrance, its tires crusted with old snow. The door opened before Ethan had a chance to step out. A woman emerged, pulling on gloves as she moved. She walked like someone used to uneven ground, balanced, efficient, no wasted motion. Dark hair tied back, tucked beneath a wool cap that had seen enough use to lose its shape. Her jacket was forest green, marked with the insignia of the local ranger service, though the fabric had softened from years of wear. She stopped when she saw him. Not wary, not welcoming, just measuring. "You're not lost," she said. Ethan stepped out of the truck. "No." Her eyes flicked past him, landing briefly on the passenger side where Vargo sat. The dog didn't move, didn't acknowledge her, but its posture shifted, subtle, precise. Recognition of a presence. The woman noticed. Of course she did. "That dog yours?" she asked. Ethan nodded once. "Picked him up yesterday." She studied him a moment longer, then looked back at the dog. That's not a pet, she said. No, Ethan replied. A small pause. Then she stepped forward, extending a hand, not for a handshake, just enough to introduce herself without making it formal. Lena Morales, she said. Ranger. Ethan gave a slight nod. Ethan. She didn't ask more than that, didn't need to. Her attention had already shifted. To the dog, she said. They stood near the truck, the cold settling between them in thin, steady waves. Lena kept her distance from the vehicle, not approaching too closely, not because she was afraid, because she understood space. That one, she said, was part of a search team. Ethan leaned lightly against the door. That's what I heard. You hear why he got pulled? Case closed, Ethan said. Weather. Lena exhaled through her nose, a faint cloud in the air. That's the report, she said. There was something in her tone, not disagreement, not quite. Something unresolved. Ethan let it sit. Then he said, We went out last night. That got her attention. Her gaze snapped back to him. In that storm? Wasn't my call, Ethan said. Her eyes narrowed slightly, then shifted again to the dog. What did he do? Ethan hesitated, not because he didn't know, because he wasn't sure how to say it without making it sound like something it wasn't. He didn't lead, Ethan said finally. Lena frowned. What do you mean? He didn't take a straight line, didn't track like he knew where he was going. Ethan paused, choosing the words carefully. He kept circling, doubling back, like he was trying to find something he'd already lost. Lena didn't interrupt, didn't question. She listened. That alone told Ethan more than anything she could have said. There's a cabin, he continued. Old, partially buried. He stopped there. Her posture changed. Not visibly dramatic, just still. I know the one, she said. Ethan studied her. Was it cleared? Lena nodded. Early in the search, first day. And nothing, she said. The word came clean, direct. We checked it, logged it, moved on. Ethan crossed his arms loosely. You sure? Lena met his gaze now. Not defensive, steady. We did our job, she said. There was no hesitation in it, no uncertainty, just conviction. Ethan pushed off the truck, stepping closer, not confrontational, just narrowing the space. He won't go inside, he said. Lena's eyes flickered. What? The dog, Ethan said. He stops at the door, stays outside, watches the perimeter. Lena didn't speak, didn't move. Ethan continued, quieter now. Not like he's afraid to go in, he said. Like he's not supposed to. That landed. Ethan saw it in the way her jaw tightened, just slightly. You're reading too much into it, she said after a moment. Am I? Yes. The answer came quickly. Too quickly. He's trained to hold position, she continued. Search dogs don't just rush structures. They assess. They wait for handlers. Ethan nodded once. That's what this looks like to you? Lena held his gaze. That's what it is. A long silence followed. Wind moved through the clearing, brushing past the building in low, steady currents. Ethan glanced toward the dog again. Vargo hadn't moved, but its focus had shifted, not toward Lena, not toward the trees, toward the ground beneath the truck, not directly beneath it, beyond it, somewhere neither of them could see. Ethan looked back at Lena. You ever go back, well? He asked. She didn't answer immediately. When? After the search. Another pause, longer this time. No, she said. Why not? Because we don't reopen closed operations without cause. Ethan tilted his head slightly. What if there was something missed? Lena's expression hardened, not aggressive, but anchored. Then it was missed for a reason, she said. Weather conditions erase more than people think. You don't get perfect searches out here. Ethan let that settle, then said, What if he left? Lena blinked once. Who? The guy, Ethan said. The one you were looking for. Lena shook her head slightly. We tracked him to the ridge line. After that, nothing. No prints, no sign. That's where it ends. Or where you stopped seeing it, Ethan said. The words hung between them. Not accusatory, not soft either. Just there. Lena looked away first, toward the trees, toward the direction of the ridge. For a moment, she didn't look like a ranger. She looked like someone replaying something she'd already accepted. That storm came in fast, she said quietly. Visibility dropped to nothing. Temperatures tanked. We had teams out too long already. Ethan didn't interrupt. We pulled them, she continued. Command decision, right call. You believe that? Yes. The answer was immediate, but not complete. Ethan watched her carefully. Then why are you still thinking about it? He asked. Lena didn't respond, didn't deny it either. Her gaze stayed fixed on the tree line. After a moment, she said, because thinking about it doesn't change anything. Ethan nodded slowly. No, he said. It doesn't. Another silence. Different this time. Heavier. I can file a request, Lena said finally. Ethan looked at her. For what? To reopen the case, she said. If there's enough to justify it. If your dog's behavior lines up with something we can verify. Ethan shook his head. No. She frowned. No? I didn't come here to restart anything, he said. Then why are you here? Ethan glanced at Vargo again. The dog hadn't moved, still watching, still somewhere else. Because he hasn't stopped, Ethan said quietly. Lena followed his gaze. For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not doubt, not belief, just a crack in the certainty she'd been holding. Small, but there. You think he's right? She asked. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He considered it, not as a question of fact, but of weight. I think, he said slowly, he doesn't know how to be wrong. Lena exhaled. A faint, tired sound. That's not how it works, she said. No, Ethan agreed. It's not? They stood there, the cold settling deeper as the light began to fade again. Eventually, Lena stepped back. If you change your mind, she said, you know where to find me. Ethan nodded. He didn't say he would. On the drive back, the road felt longer, not harder, just heavier. Beside him, Vargo remained still, eyes fixed in that same direction, always that direction. Ethan tightened his grip on the wheel, just slightly, not from tension, from recognition, not of the place, of the feeling. He had known it once, the moment when leaving didn't feel like a choice. But staying wasn't an option either. When they reached the cabin, nothing had changed. Same snow, same silence, same walls. But the space inside it felt different now, not empty, occupied by something that hadn't been there before. Ethan stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Vargo followed, then stopped. Not at the door, not this time. It stood in the middle of the room, turning slowly, as if mapping something unseen. Ethan watched it, didn't speak, didn't interfere. After a moment, the dog settled, not lying down, just still, waiting. Ethan leaned against the wall, arms folded loosely. He didn't feel urgency, didn't feel pressure, but something had shifted, not outside, inside the question, and questions, he knew, didn't go away just because you refused to answer them. The pattern didn't break. That was the first thing Ethan noticed. Not immediately, because at first, it looked like nothing had changed. The cabin held its silence, the routines repeated, the weather shifted in slow, indifferent cycles. But underneath it, something had settled into place. Every morning, Vargo faced the same direction. Every afternoon, it drifted closer to the edge of the clearing. And every evening, it stopped just short of leaving, like a line drawn somewhere neither of them could see. Ethan didn't interfere. He didn't follow every time either, at first. He let the behavior exist without interpretation, the way you let a clock tick without questioning what it measured. But patterns weren't random, not like this, not when they repeated with that kind of precision. By the third day, he stopped pretending it was nothing. They left just after sunrise. No storm this time. The sky was clear enough to outline the treetops in pale light, the snow hard-packed from previous winds. Conditions were better. That didn't make it easier. Ethan adjusted the straps of the small pack on his shoulders, checked the knife, the extra gloves, the water. Not out of habit this time. Out of decision. Vargo didn't wait for him. It stepped forward as soon as Ethan reached the tree line, moving at that same measured pace. Not fast, not hesitant. Deliberate. Ethan followed. The difference from before was subtle, but it mattered. Vargo still didn't move in a straight line. But now Ethan understood that wasn't the point. He stopped trying to map a destination. Instead, he tracked the pauses, where the dog slowed, where it circled, where it lingered just long enough to suggest something had once been there. The forest felt less like a place and more like a record. And Vargo wasn't leading. It was rereading. They reached the old cabin again before midday. The snow had shifted around it, reshaping the clearing, softening the angles of the structure. It looked even smaller now, more like something pressed into the earth than built on top of it. Vargo didn't approach the door this time. It veered off before reaching it. Ethan stopped, watched. The dog moved past the cabin, cutting into a section of trees they hadn't explored before. Not far. Just beyond the edge of what had felt like the boundary. Ethan followed. He felt it immediately, the difference in terrain, not visible, but underfoot. The snow here sat unevenly, slight depressions hidden beneath the surface, subtle changes in density that made each step harder to predict. He slowed. Vargo didn't. But it didn't move far ahead either. It circled once. Then again. Smaller this time. Ethan watched carefully. "You've been here," he said quietly. The dog didn't respond, but it didn't leave either. Ethan stepped forward. His boot sank deeper than expected. He paused, shifted his weight. The snow collapsed slightly beneath him. Not a fall, just a give. Enough to notice. He crouched slowly, brushing away the top layer with his gloved hand. Packed snow underneath. Older, denser, not natural. He cleared more. The edge of something emerged. Fabric. Ethan's breath slowed. He didn't rush, didn't pull immediately. He cleared the surrounding snow first, working methodically, revealing shape before lifting weight. A backpack. Dark, weather-worn, partially collapsed from pressure and time. Vargo stood just behind him now, not pressing forward, not retreating, just present. Ethan sat back slightly on his heels, staring at the object for a long moment before touching it again. "This is it," he said. Not a question. The zipper resisted at first, frozen in places. Ethan worked it slowly, careful not to tear the material. It gave in small increments, opening just enough to let cold air slip inside. He reached in, gloves brushed against paper, a notebook. He pulled it out carefully. The cover was warped, edges curled, pages stiff from exposure. He opened it slowly, mindful of how fragile it might be. The first few pages were illegible, ink smeared, lines blurred by moisture. He flipped further. The writing improved, still rough, still uneven, but readable. Ethan adjusted his position, angling the notebook toward the light. The handwriting wasn't neat. It wasn't meant to be. Short lines, fragmented thoughts, notes written between effort and exhaustion. Day 1, lost the trail, white out. Day 2, found partial shelter, not ideal, still holding. Day 3, heard something, could be them. Ethan's grip tightened slightly on the page. He kept reading. Day 4, heard voices, close, couldn't reach, tried signal, no response. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't written for anyone else. That made them heavier. He turned the page. Day 5, they're out there, I know it. Just need them to see me. Ethan stopped, not because he couldn't continue, because he understood enough. Behind him, Vargo shifted, just slightly. Ethan didn't look back. He closed the notebook halfway, resting it against his knee. There was a signal, he said quietly. Not to the dog, to the space between them. They were close. He exhaled slowly, and nobody saw it. The radio came next. Ethan pulled it from the bag, turning it in his hands. The casing was cracked along one edge, antenna bent slightly. Not destroyed, just compromised. He pressed the power switch out of instinct. Nothing, of course. Still, he held it a moment longer than necessary, then set it down beside the bag. Vargo stepped forward, careful, measured. It lowered its head toward the open pack, not sniffing for food, not searching, just acknowledging. Ethan watched it. You knew, he said. The dog didn't react, but it didn't look away either. Ethan sat there longer than he expected. The forest around them stayed quiet. No wind strong enough to break the branches. No sound beyond the subtle shifts of snow settling under its own weight. Time stretched, not forward, outward. Ethan looked back at the notebook, then at the radio, then at the space around them. He imagined it. The storm, the reduced visibility. Voices carried unevenly through wind, a signal, missed by feet, by seconds, by conditions no one could control. He closed his eyes briefly, not in regret, in recognition. "You don't come back for secrets," Ethan said after a while. He looked at Vargo. The dog met his gaze this time, fully. "You come back for that moment," he continued, "the one that didn't land." Vargo didn't move, didn't need to. The stillness said enough. Ethan reached for the notebook again. He didn't read further. He didn't need to. The story wasn't in the rest of the pages. It was already here. He slid it back into the bag, carefully, deliberately, not hiding it, not preserving it either, just returning it. The snow began to shift again, not a storm, just a light drift moving through the trees. Ethan stood slowly, brushing his hands together. Vargo stepped back, gave him space. Ethan looked down at the ground where the bag had been buried, then at the cabin, barely visible through the trees, then at the path they had taken to get here. Nothing had changed, and everything had. "We're not done," Ethan said quietly. Not a declaration, not a plan, just an acknowledgement. Vargo turned slightly, not toward the cabin, not toward the clearing, toward the forest, deeper. But it didn't move. Not yet. Ethan adjusted the strap of his pack again, took one last look at the ground, then stepped back. Vargo remained where it was, still, watching, not the bag, not the cabin, the space between them. Ethan didn't go back the next morning. That, more than anything, felt like a decision, not avoidance, not hesitation, a line. He stayed in the cabin longer than usual, letting the fire burn low before adding wood, moving slower through routines that had once been automatic. The notebook sat on the table where he had placed it the night before, closed, edges still damp from thawing. He hadn't opened it again. He didn't need to. Across the room, Vargo lay near the center of the floor, not at the door, not angled toward the forest. Its head rested low between its paws, eyes half open, tracking small shifts in light more than anything outside. For the first time since Ethan had brought it here, the dog wasn't positioned like it was waiting for something to begin. It was between states, not at rest, not on alert, suspended. Ethan watched it for a long moment, then reached for the notebook. He didn't open it. He just held it, thumb pressed along the spine where the pages had warped together. He knew what it contained. He knew what it meant, and he knew what it would become if he let it leave this room. The truck ride back to the ranger outpost felt shorter, or maybe just more direct. Ethan didn't look at the forest this time, didn't follow the invisible line Vargo had been tracing for days. He kept his eyes on the road. The dog sat beside him, quieter than before, not still in that rigid, purposeful way, but not restless either. It didn't lean toward the window, didn't search. It simply remained. That, somehow, felt heavier. Lena was outside when he arrived, same place as before, though this time she was already watching the road as he pulled in, arms crossed against the cold. She didn't wave, didn't call out. She waited. Ethan stepped out of the truck with the notebook in his hand. That was enough. Her posture shifted immediately, not forward, not back, focused. "You found something," she said. Ethan didn't answer right away. He walked closer, stopping a few feet away, holding the notebook where she could see it but not yet reach. "A pack," he said. "Buried, not far past the cabin." Lena's eyes dropped to the notebook, then lifted again. "How intact?" "Enough." "What's in it?" Ethan exhaled slowly. Proof he made it past the cabin. Lena went still, not physically, internally. Ethan could see it, the recalculation, the shift in structure behind her eyes. "That's not possible," she said. "It is," Ethan replied. "We cleared that area." "I know." "Thoroughly." Ethan nodded once. "And you missed him." The words landed hard. Not because of how they were said, because of what they meant. Lena took a step back, just enough to reset her stance. "No," she said quietly. "No, we didn't." Ethan didn't argue. He handed her the notebook. She hesitated for half a second before taking it. That was the first crack. She opened it carefully, flipping past the warped pages until she found writing she could read. Her eyes moved quickly at first, then slower, then stopped. She turned a page, read again. Ethan watched her. Not her face, her posture, the way her shoulders tightened, then lowered, the way her grip on the notebook shifted, not from control, but from something closer to weight. "He hurt us," she said after a moment. Not a question. A realization. Ethan didn't respond. "He wrote it," she continued, voice quieter now. "Day 4. Voices nearby." Her jaw tightened. "We were there." She looked up at Ethan. Not defensive anymore. Not certain. "What else?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "That's enough." "No, it's not." "It is." Lena closed the notebook halfway, fingers still resting inside the pages. "You don't get to decide that," she said. Ethan met her gaze. Someone already did. The wind picked up slightly, carrying fine snow across the gravel in thin streaks. Lena stepped away from him, pacing once, then stopping again. "This changes everything," she said. "The report, the conclusion, the timeline." "It changes the record," Ethan said. "Not the outcome," she turned back sharply. "That man was alive." "For a few more days," Ethan replied, "and we left him there." Ethan didn't answer. Didn't need to. Lena's breath came out uneven now, visible in the cold air. "You don't just bury that," she said. "You don't just walk away from it." Ethan's gaze didn't shift. "You already did." Silence fell between them. Not the empty kind, the kind that filled space too completely. Lena looked down at the notebook again, flipping to the page she had stopped on. Her finger traced a line, not reading it again, just following the shape of it. "He tried to signal," she said. "Radio, something." "It didn't carry." Her throat moved as she swallowed. "We were close enough." "Not close enough." She closed the notebook, this time firmly. "That's not how this works," she said. "We report it. We reopen the case. We notify the family." "Why?" The word cut through her sentence cleanly. Lena froze. "What?" "Why?" Ethan repeated. Her eyes narrowed. "Because they deserve to know." Ethan shook his head slightly. "Or because you need them to know." That hit harder than anything else. Not loud, not aggressive, just precise. Lena stepped forward now, the space between them closing. "You think this is about me?" she said. "I think it's about what you carry," Ethan replied. "And what do you think that is?" He didn't hesitate. "Something unfinished." She stared at him, long enough for the wind to shift direction again. Then she spoke. "We left someone out there," she said. "Alive. Calling for help." Her voice didn't rise, didn't break, it narrowed. "And you're telling me we just let that stay buried?" Ethan's expression didn't change. "I'm telling you," he said slowly, "that digging it up doesn't change what happened. It changes what we do about it." "No," Ethan said. "It changes what you say about it." Lena took another step forward. "This isn't your call." Ethan nodded. "You're right." He reached out, took the notebook back from her hands, not forcefully, not abruptly, just reclaiming it. "And it's not yours either." She didn't stop him. That was the second crack. "You don't know what that family's been through," she said. Ethan looked at her. "No," he said, "but I know what happens when you give someone an answer that doesn't help them live with it." Lena's eyes sharpened. "You think silence helps?" "I think it's already been decided," Ethan said. "By who?" He didn't look at her this time. He looked past her, toward the trees. By everything that happened after they stopped looking. The wind died down slightly, just enough to make the quiet noticeable again. Lena stood there, hands empty now, shoulders tight. "You're wrong," she said. "Maybe." "That's not good enough," Ethan nodded once. "It never is." Neither of them moved for a long time. Then Lena stepped back. Not in retreat. In distance. "If I file this," she said, "it becomes official. It gets reviewed. It gets processed." Ethan didn't respond. "It doesn't just sit in a cabin," she continued. "No," he said, "it doesn't." She looked at him one last time. Something in her expression had changed, not softened, not hardened, just shifted. "Then what are you going to do with it?" she asked. Ethan held the notebook at his side. He considered the question, not for the answer, for what it required. "I haven't decided yet," he said. That wasn't entirely true, but it was close enough. He turned, walking back toward the truck. Vargo hadn't moved. It watched him approach, not with that fixed intensity from before, but with something quieter, less searching, more present. Ethan opened the door. The dog stepped in without hesitation. That was new. He drove away without looking back. The first morning it happened, Ethan didn't notice right away. The fire had burned low overnight, leaving behind a soft bed of gray ash and a faint, lingering warmth that barely held against the cold seeping in through the walls. Light filtered through the window, thin and pale, catching dust and wood grain in quiet detail. Ethan sat at the table, hands wrapped around a cup that had gone cold before he remembered to drink it. Across the room, Vargo was asleep. Not lying still, not resting lightly with its head raised, ears twitching at every shift in the air. Asleep. Its body stretched along the floor, ribs rising and falling in slow, even rhythm. Its head rested fully against the wood, one ear folded slightly under its weight. Its eyes were closed, not half-lidded, not watching through the illusion of rest. Closed. Ethan set the cup down carefully. He didn't move closer. He didn't speak. He just watched. It took him a moment to understand what was different, not the position, not the breathing, the absence. There was no tension in the dog's frame, no readiness held in reserve, no part of it seemed poised to react. It wasn't listening. It wasn't waiting. It was off duty. Ethan leaned back slowly in his chair. His gaze drifted toward the door. Vargo wasn't there. For days, the space near the door had carried a kind of gravity, something that drew the dog toward it, kept it angled toward the forest even when nothing moved out there. Now, it was just a door, closed, ordinary. Ethan stood, moving quietly across the room. He stepped past the dog, careful not to disturb it, and opened the door. Cold air slipped inside, clean and sharp. The forest beyond looked unchanged. Same trees, same snow, same distance. But something had shifted, not outside, inside the space between what had been and what was. Ethan stepped out onto the porch. He waited. Nothing followed him. Behind him, Vargo didn't stir. Later that day, Ethan drove into town again, not because he needed to, not because there was something to fix or confirm, just because the cabin felt different, quieter in a way that wasn't empty. He found Harvey near the same place as before, leaning against the side of the general store, hands buried in the pockets of his coat. The old man looked up as Ethan approached, eyes narrowing slightly in recognition. "You look like you slept," Harvey said. Ethan stopped beside him. "I did." Harvey gave a small nod, like that answered more than it should have. "And the dog?" he asked. Ethan glanced back toward the truck. Vargo lay across the passenger seat, head resting against the door, eyes closed. "Same," Ethan said. Harvey followed his gaze, then said almost to himself, "That's something." Ethan didn't respond. He leaned lightly against the wall beside Harvey, both of them facing the quiet stretch of road that cut through town. "Went back?" Harvey asked after a moment. Ethan nodded. "Found something?" Another pause, then, "Enough." Harvey didn't push, didn't ask what. He just shifted his weight slightly, looking out toward the mountains beyond the town. "Some things don't need more than that," he said. Ethan let that settle. "You ever think about going back out there?" Ethan asked. Harvey gave a faint shrug. "Not anymore." "Why not?" The old man's eyes stayed on the horizon. "Because I stopped looking for something I can't change," he said. Ethan considered that, then asked, "Did it help?" Harvey let out a quiet breath. "No," he said, "but it stopped hurting the same way." They stood there for a while longer, the wind moving lightly through the street, carrying the faint sound of something loose rattling somewhere out of sight. When Ethan finally pushed off the wall, Harvey didn't stop him. "Take care of that dog," he said. Ethan nodded once. "I will." Lena was at the ranger station when Ethan stopped there on the way back. This time, she didn't wait outside. He found her inside, standing near a desk cluttered with maps and reports, a pen resting between her fingers as she stared down at something she hadn't written. She looked up when he entered. There was no surprise in her expression, just recognition. "You came back," she said. Ethan stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I said I might." She watched him for a moment, then set the pen down. "You didn't file anything," she said. "No." "And you're not going to?" It wasn't a question. Ethan shook his head. "No." Lena nodded slowly. Not agreement, acceptance. "Figures," she said. She moved around the desk, leaning back against it, arms crossed loosely, not defensive this time, just grounded. "What did you do with it?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He thought about the question, not what it asked, but what it assumed. Then he reached into his jacket. He pulled out a small object and held it in his hand, not offering it, just letting it be seen. A metal tag. Weathered, edges worn smooth, not official, not marked clearly enough to identify anything beyond the fact that it had belonged to someone once. Lena's eyes dropped to it. "That's all you kept?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "That's enough." She studied him for a moment longer, then pushed herself upright. "You know," she said quietly, "there's still a version of this where we do things differently." Ethan met her gaze. "I know." "And you're choosing not to." "Yes." Lena walked past him, stopping near the window. She looked out at the trees, the same direction both he and Vargo had been drawn to for days. "I used to think," she said, "that getting the answer mattered more than anything else." Ethan didn't interrupt. "That if you could just explain what happened, it made it right somehow." She let out a faint breath. "It doesn't." Ethan shifted his weight slightly. "No," he said. "It doesn't." She turned back to him. "You're not wrong," she said. It wasn't easy for her to say. That made it matter more. "But you're not entirely right either." Ethan gave a small nod. "That's usually how it goes." They didn't argue, not this time. There was nothing left to prove. When Ethan stepped outside, the air felt different again, not lighter, just settled. He drove back up the mountain without stopping. At the cabin, the door was still open from when he'd left earlier. He hadn't noticed. Inside, Vargo lay in the same place as before, still asleep, still unmoving. Ethan stepped inside quietly, closing the door behind him. The dog didn't wake. He crossed the room slowly, kneeling beside it. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he reached out, placing a hand gently against the dog's neck. Warm, steady, alive in a way that didn't feel like tension anymore. Vargo didn't startle, didn't shift into alertness. It just breathed. Ethan sat there for a long time, not thinking, not remembering, just present. The metal tag rested in his palm, cool against his skin. He turned it once, then closed his hand around it, not as evidence, not as proof, just as something that had been there. That night, Ethan didn't check the door twice, didn't place the knife within immediate reach. He lay down, one arm resting loosely across his chest, eyes open for a while before they closed without effort. Sleep came, not heavy, not deep, but uninterrupted. Across the room, Vargo didn't move, didn't watch, didn't wait. For the first time since Ethan had taken him from that lot, the dog wasn't holding a position. It wasn't guarding anything. It wasn't expecting anything to return. It was done. Some truths don't arrive in time to change what happened, but sometimes they arrive just in time to change us. Vargo didn't keep searching because he was lost. He stayed because something in him refused to let the story end unfinished. And when it finally did, he let go. Maybe in our own lives we carry moments like that, things we wish we had seen, words we wish we had heard, people we wish we hadn't lost. Not every answer will bring peace. But sometimes peace comes when we stop trying to fix the past and start choosing how we live with it. If you're holding on to something that never fully made sense, I hope you find the kind of quiet that doesn't need answers anymore. And if you do, hold on to it. That might be your healing. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to hear what part touched you the most. And if you believe stories like this matter, consider subscribing to follow more journeys like this one. Wherever you are, may you find rest for the things you've carried too long.